If you have already watched this introductory information, you can skip ahead no more than 10 minutes. Hello, welcome. I am predicting that Vice President Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash in St. Louis due to a bird strike into Busch Stadium. In the area code 314, it will be a burning bush, as described in Exodus 3:14. On September 25th, 2024, she will be replaced by Michelle Obama, and then Barack Obama will replace Michelle. Harris's plane is predicted to crash in St. Louis on Wednesday morning at 3 a.m. on September 25th. Because Simon and Garfunkel's first studio album was named Wednesday Morning 3 a.m., but her flight is predicted to depart Los Angeles LAX Airport on September 24th. I am predicting that former President Jimmy Carter will die on September 21st, and that his prophetic funeral, in which Trump will sit next to Obama, will be on September 26th. It is predicted that President Trump will die from a heart attack on the same day as Jimmy Carter's funeral on September 26th. It is also predicted that Trump's heart attack will be triggered by a direct energy weapon that will target Trump through Bluetooth technology. The components inside the pointy thing that Trump took will facilitate this. And it is believed that this direct energy weapon will be used by Barack Obama when he is sitting next to Trump at the funeral. I am predicting that dirty bombs will explode in Manhattan, New York City, and there will be a large-scale evacuation on September 27th. I am predicting that Israel will bomb Iran on September 28th. I am predicting that singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on September 25th. Either Paul Simon or Kamala Harris will die at 3 a.m. on Wednesday morning on September 25th. I am predicting that a solar flare will erupt on the surface of the sun and send a coronal mass ejection that will hit Earth on October 3rd, 2024. Which will knock out America's power grid and will lead to food shortages. The hit of the coronal mass ejection, predicted for October 3rd, that will knock out the power grid, will also knock many planes out of the sky. October 3rd, the Feast of Trumpets in the Hebrew calendar, will be the day of the resurrection rapture event. It will be the first of 3 raptures. I am predicting that on October 4th, 2024, the key will open the bottomless pit and fallen angels will cross over into the earthly realm. October 4th will be a symbolic beginning to the 5th trumpet judgment that is described in Revelation chapter 9, when the demonic realm collides with the earthly realm. October 4th will be a symbolic beginning to demons pretending to be aliens, and it is possible that on October 4th, Pope Francis will announce that aliens have arrived and have made him the ambassador for the world. This will immediately give Pope Francis, the Antichrist, supreme power over governments of the world. At some point, there will be a massive Mary apparition that will deceive the masses, because all Mary apparitions in history have been demons pretending to be Mary. October 4th will be a symbolic beginning to a zombie pandemic and the masses becoming demonically possessed that will be facilitated through the thing, which is the mark of the Antichrist and 5G frequencies. October 4th will be a symbolic beginning to the coming genocide politicide in America. It is predicted that after Kamala Harris's death in a plane crash, Joe Biden will appoint Michelle Obama as his vice president, I am predicting that Joe Biden will step down and Michelle Obama will become the 47th president on October 12th, 2024. I am predicting that President Michelle Obama will appoint Barack Obama as the 51st vice president on October 12th, 2024. I am predicting that Michelle Obama will step down and Barack Obama will become the 48th president on November 2nd, 2024. November 24th, 2024, the 8th day of the Feast of Tabernacles, will be the date of the second of 3 raptures. It is predicted that on November 16th, 2024, the historic barge that has been stuck on the rocks of the Niagara River for over 100 years will finally break free and crash over Niagara Falls. The reason for this is that Niagara Falls is Noah's flood symbolism, and the barge was involved in the most dramatic rescue in the history of Niagara Falls, symbolic of Noah's Ark. Niagara in the native language means straight, narrow way, and Niagara's Horseshoe Falls is perfectly aimed at the CN Tower in downtown Toronto, because Toronto and its tower are symbolic of the Tower of Babel. In a game of horseshoes, the object is to aim the horseshoe and throw it at the metal stick, which is why the Horseshoe Falls is perfectly aimed at the metal stick that is the CN Tower. God is communicating that as testament for those who will live in the 1,000 years of Christ's reign on earth, the geography of North America will, as a result of a massive earthquake, be divided by a body of water from the Great Lakes to the Mississippi Delta. This destruction will be judgment on America and Canada for attempting to divide God's land, Israel. When this happens, the water in the Great Lakes will spill out over southern Ontario and Toronto. I am predicting that on November 23rd, 2024, there will be a catastrophic asteroid hit of Earth, which will trigger the eruption of Yellowstone volcano, and will cause the volcano in the Canary Islands to collapse into the Atlantic Ocean and send a mega tsunami towards the east coast. The asteroid will also trigger a mega landslide on Hawaii Island that will trigger a mega tsunami that will hit the west coast. It will also trigger the collapse of the Hoover Dam, which will cause a water panic in California, and many other devastating earthquakes. November 23rd will also be the date of the third of the 3 raptures. President Trump and RFK Jr. are the 2 witnesses in Bible prophecy in Revelation chapter 11. It is predicted that RFK Jr. will be shot and killed on November 7th, 2024. The day of the Lord, the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, will be on December 26th, 2024. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. All right, before we begin this video, that will talk about how it is known ahead of time that Paul Simon, the famous singer-songwriter, will die on September 19th. It needs to be explained how God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It's an interconnected web, and none of God's prophetic signs, which, by the way, Jesus commanded his disciples to watch for, can be fully or properly understood without their connections and context with the other prophetic signs. It is through this that God is able to tell stories. And this connecting of signs engenders trails of signs that, in fact, have steps in the trail. All right? For example, and by the way, the reason why God does this is because it is through this that he can tell stories, and really profound stories that reveal extremely important knowledge and information that everyone needs to know. It's quite different than if you were to tap someone on the shoulder and say, hey, tell the world that this is going to happen on such and such date. That would essentially give us nothing compared to what God is doing in his true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. And one such date that was a step that was known in advance to be expected for being relevant to the coming death of Paul Simon was March 6th. There are about 10 other videos that tell the stories, the amazing beyond words and extremely important stories that God told regarding Paul Simon that led to March 6th, 2024. Okay? And there are now 3 videos or so. There's the videos, the few videos that come after March 6th explain how the trail of signs leads on from March 6th to September 19th, the date it is now predicted that Paul Simon will die. Okay, but if you only listen to those videos, the ones that will be recently posted, you will have missed everything, or most things, about Paul Simon. You won't know these stories that God has been telling through his big picture of signs about Paul Simon. I can't stress enough what a shame that would be, but it's not only a shame, there's essential knowledge that you need to know. And so what I am saying is that go back into the video catalog after the prediction comes to pass and watch the other videos that show and demonstrate and explain how God was leading to March 6th, 2024. In other words, the thumbnail will say that Paul Simon is predicted to die on March 6th, and those videos are 100% correct. The signs we received on March 6th confirmed all of the analysis. Like I'm saying, it's a step in the trail of signs. And the signs that occurred on March 6th are amazing, and they are completely relevant to Paul Simon, as you will see. The wise person will recognize that when the prediction comes to pass, they will know that they need to watch every single minute of every video on this channel, and including specifically all of the Paul Simon videos. Okay? The big picture comes together as more pieces of the puzzle come, and it becomes clearer, but the stories that God is telling are told in the videos that predict Paul Simon will die on March 6th. So make sure you watch those other videos too. There's like 8 or 10 other videos. All right, this video is documenting this prediction that Paul Simon, singer-songwriter, will die on September 19th, 2024. In this video, I will read briefly some reasons that explain how this date is known ahead of time, that Paul Simon will die on September 19th. All right, September 19th ended up being another very, very important step in the trail of signs that is leading to the predicted date that Paul Simon will die on September 25th. On the same day, it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash into a baseball stadium. And that is what we received on September 19th, a prophetic sign that was a baseball sign that's relevant to Paul Simon. And this is all explained in the absolute must-watch. Paul Simon, Kamala Harris will die on September 25th equals Mrs. Robinson equals Michelle Obama. In other words, Mrs. Michelle Robinson Obama. Her maiden name is Robinson. Paul Simon is known for being an avid baseball fan, and as I will explain in that other video, the big baseball sign of the season is most important and relevant to Paul Simon. That occurred on September 19th. I will explain that. I'll also just explain here too that baseball in general is very important in God's signs because, as James Earl Jones said in the most iconic baseball movie ever made, when he delivered his famous monologue and said that America can be great again, he said that baseball is intertwined with American history. And God has had his hand on American history, and it's intertwined with baseball. Which is why the beginning of the destruction, Kamala Harris's death in a plane crash, which will lead to the rise of the Antichrist as her replacement, will be into a baseball stadium. And the signs we received on September 19th that confirmed all of the analysis that I'm about to explain in this video point to the day that Paul Simon sang Mrs. Robinson in a baseball stadium. After Joe DiMaggio died, one of the lyrics in the song is about Joe DiMaggio. Now, God has told so many stories, very, very extremely important stories, and communicated extremely important knowledge and information through the signs, through Joe DiMaggio, through his former wife, Marilyn Monroe, and all of this connects together. It is so amazing. Make sure you watch the other video. Now, going forward for the rest of this video, all of the signs, including, by the way, on September 19th, we received a prophetic sign, which was the breaking news of the scandal regarding the man that is running for governor of the 4+4+4th state, named Mark Robinson, which hints at Michelle Robinson Obama. So that was more confirmation that all of the baseball sign on September 19th pointed to the day that Paul Simon sang Mrs. Robinson in a baseball stadium. And so anyway, the big sign was the 50-50. Shohei Ohtani, the league's unprecedented athlete in history, reached for the first time, the first ever, to reach the 50 stolen bases and 50 home runs in the same season. But he also, on the same day, September 19th, made it to the 51 and 51 level, 51 home runs and 51 stolen bases in the same season. And as I will explain, that's relevant, and it hints at adding 5 + 1 days to September 19th to get September 25th. Okay, all of that will be explained. Now, going forward, the rest of this video will be explaining the amazing things that God did to point to September 19th in the first place, and this information needs to be known. The reason why God does this is so that you can know the information leading up to September 19th. In other words, God develops a trail, a big picture of signs that include steps in the way along the trail. And in doing so, he is able to tell stories, which he wouldn't have otherwise been able to do. If he had just tapped someone on the shoulder and said, hey, tell the world that so Paul Simon is going to die on September 25th, it would accomplish nothing. And so to get this extremely important essential knowledge and information across, he tells these stories which require these steps in the trail. And I know, because I know God's big picture of signs, and the prediction will prove that I do know this. Okay? And so anyway, you need to still watch the rest of this video. It's extremely important and amazing. This is how I know of the sign that occurred on September 19th being relevant to adding 5 plus 1 days, for example. That's important. You need to know how I knew that. And that story is being told by God through this video. Make sure you watch all of this video. All right, this video is documenting this prediction that Paul Simon, singer-songwriter, will die on September 19th, 2024. In this video, I will read briefly some reasons that explain how this date is known ahead of time, that Paul Simon will die on September 19th. This is an email that I wrote, as you can see, on September 1st. Okay, so this prediction has been known since September 1st. And here I will explain some of the reasons briefly. I will briefly explain some of the reasons for how this date is known. And so let's begin. This email is documenting the prediction that singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on September 19th. The 44th president is the Antichrist, who was known as the Night Owl President. Paul Simon is predicted to die on September 19th, 2024, exactly 4 times 4 months after the release of his most recent album, for which the cover art is an illustration of an owl. In turn, the release of the album was 4 years, 4 months, and 4 days after Simon received instructions in a dream to create the album and title it 7 Psalms. Okay, so I just want to interject here that Paul Simon has been telling this story in all of the interviews regarding this new album that he released in May of 2023, that he received the instruction to make the album in a dream. In fact, he took a note right after having the dream, and he has framed it, and he shows off the framed note to the journalists. So this is a big deal in terms of this story, which is this prophetic significance of Paul Simon's 7 Psalms album. Okay, and he just says that he received some voice telling him that he is now working on 7 Psalms. Okay? For that matter, he has also said that the biggest hits of his, arguably, just came to him. He admits that it wasn't really him, as he says, it just flowed through him, or I forget how he puts it exactly, but he channels it. I don't think he says the word channel, though, and because that has New Age connotations. But yeah, you get the idea. So anyway, what we have here is the release of the album, exactly 4 years, 4 months, and 4 days. And what I am saying is that Paul Simon is predicted to die exactly 4 times 4 months after the release of the album. Okay, again, if it's not clear because it isn't drawn out in a diagram, you have the date of the dream, and then add 4 years, 4 months, 4 days to the release of the album, and then add 4 times 4 months to September 19th, the date it is predicted that Paul Simon will die. And the reason why that's all relevant is because the main theme of God's big picture of signs is identifying the Antichrist, the second of 2 Antichrists, the 44th president. Okay? Also, 4 times 4 months is exactly 70 weeks. And this hints at 7 Psalms, because the most central prophecy in the Bible regards a period of 70 weeks. It's actually called the 70 weeks prophecy. This is the most central prophecy in the Bible, and the 70th week of the 70 weeks is symbolic of the period of the Antichrist. And so it's astounding that 4 times 4 months is actually equal to 70 weeks. First of all, because that identifies the Antichrist in that 70th week. God designed it this way. It's amazing. However, we also have this in terms of a connection to the album Seven Psalms. Okay, now the reason why Paul Simon is being used here, one reason is that he symbolizes, speaking of songs that he says he didn't really write himself, The Sound of Silence, his first big hit. Sound of Silence is symbolic of Revelation chapter 8, verse 1, where John describes this period of silence, for as he wrote, about a half an hour before the 7 trumpet judgments. And that's why 7 psalms. And Paul Simon, Sound of Silence followed by 7 trumpets, 7 psalms is the name of the album. Also, as explained in other videos, Paul Simon's big hit that involves trumpets, it's known for its trumpets, is Late in the Evening. And that's symbolic of time being late to repent before the judgment destruction, because the 7 trumpets are the 7 trumpets of judgment and destruction. Okay, the next point here. September 19th, 2024 will be exactly 43 years after Simon and Garfunkel's prophetic reunion concert in Central Park. The last song played, as I just actually mentioned, well, I didn't actually say this, but okay, so this is the prophetic concert, and the last song that was played was Simon's hit, Late in the Evening. It was literally late in the evening when they ended the concert, and that was the song that was played. But the point is that that date was September 19th, and we are talking about Paul Simon dying exactly 43 years later. 43 years from Simon and Garfunkel's prophetic reunion concert hints at their first album together titled Wednesday Morning 3 a.m. That's the title or name of the first album. Wednesday is the 4th day of the week, and so 3 a.m., and this is why 43 years hints at Wednesday morning 3 a.m. 43 also hints at 4 plus 3 equals 7, and therefore hints at Simon's most recent album, 7 Psalms, which was released exactly 4 times 4 months prior to September 19th. To confirm his signs and connections, God pairs the numbers 23 and 44 together, as the 44th president is the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school. September 19th is 4 times 4 months after the release of 7 Psalms, and September 19th is 2 times 3 days before it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on Wednesday morning at 3 a.m. on September 25th. By the way, the Wednesday Morning 3 a.m. album was released exactly 1 day before Kamala Harris was born, which was a big clue that Paul Simon would die just prior to the death of Kamala Harris, who will die on a Wednesday morning at 3 a.m. Kamala Harris will be homeward bound on a flight across the country, and the prophetic reunion concert in Central Park was exactly 188 months after the release of Simon and Garfunkel's song, Homeward Bound. H188 in Strong's Concordance is the word that means woe! It is used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. There's more coming, don't worry, but I'll just read this sentence anyway. This is merely scratching the surface of the reasons for how this prediction is known in advance. For more information, please visit Odyssey, spelled ODYSEE.com, or Rumble.com video channels named Harris Crash Prediction. And also make sure to read the website TrumpPrediction.com. All right, now, as we can see here, I also wrote an email predicting that Paul Simon would die on August 19th. Now, first, it needs to be explained how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. Okay? Now, when the prediction comes to pass, it'll prove that I know what I'm talking about. That's the point. Now, when the prediction doesn't come to pass, feel free to dismiss what I'm saying, of course. But when the prediction comes to pass, what I'm saying is how it works. Because I know better than anyone how it works. That's how I was able to make the prediction. Now, how it works is that God develops trails of signs. God will actually point to a date for a particular theme or prediction, in this case, the death of Paul Simon. And that date will not necessarily end up being the actual date of the event, but there will be a relevant or plural signs, prophetic signs, that occur on that date that confirm all of the analysis because they're related to the theme, in this case, Paul Simon. And they provide more information that leads further on down the timeline to the actual event. That's how it works, okay? The skeptic will say, well, that's just silly. You're just continually picking dates. Well, no, because when the prediction comes to pass, it will prove what I'm saying is true. But in my opinion, the rational person will be able to recognize that what I am saying is not made up and is clearly clear. It's clearly obvious. What I'm saying is regarding, or what I will say regarding August 19th is it fits. It's not contrived. But anyway, it doesn't matter what you think, because when the prediction comes to pass, it will prove that it isn't contrived. Okay, that's the point. Now, so August 19th was pointed to. And this is an interesting one because there were a number of prophetic signs. It was a day for prophetic signs. It was the first day of the convention, and there were musician signs. For example, James Taylor, extremely prophetic in God's signs. I'm not going to elaborate on all of what happened and all of, it would require too much. I'm just going to keep it as short as possible, and so therefore I'm not going to, for example, explain the significance of James Taylor, because really that would take 2 hours. That's the way it is with all of the information, in fact. It's just so enormous, God's signs. And what can I do except play this role of briefly explaining things to you? I wish I could explain everything to you all at once. Maybe there'll be an opportunity for that in the eternity. But for now, we're just going to make predictions and explain how I know as minimally as possible. So anyway, so August 19th was pointed to, and one of the signs we received was the death of Phil Donahue. The news broke of his death on September 19th. This one of these instances in which a death prophetic sign actually isn't the day of his death, but the day that the news broke. This is a common thing, actually. How do I know this? I've been studying his big picture of signs from morning until night for more than 6 years, and deaths are a very big way in which God communicates symbolism for the prophetic signs to communicate information. And so over time, it's been quite clear that, anyway. So also what I forgot to mention is that the reason why God develops the trails of signs and the steps is so that he can communicate lots of knowledge and wisdom. Because if you think about it, if God were to just tap someone on the shoulder and say, hey, tell the world that this is going to happen on such and such date, it would provide us with very little or nothing in terms of information or importance. And so to tell the stories, or rather I should say God has been telling amazing, elaborate stories through all of this big picture of connected signs that is for the purpose of delivering very important information and knowledge. And that's why all of this needs to be learned and watched. And so anyway, so back to what I was saying. Phil Donahue died at the age of 88. 88 is very significant. The word trump in simple English gematria, A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, is equal to 88, for example. And trump is in archaic English is the word that means trumpet, or the sounding of a trumpet, which is an important thing in terms of God in the Bible. It's like trumpeting something. It's like an announcement. a prophetic sign, in other words. Now, Phil Donahue died, I think he died in California, I'm not sure, but California, although it's not necessary for this particular video actually. But anyway, California is also equal to 88 in simple English gematria. And so is obviously the name Trump, because Trump is God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs. But anyway, Phil Donahue died at the age of 88. Now, I just mentioned a minute ago how Homeward Bound was released exactly 188 months before the prophetic reunion concert. And I mentioned how 188 in Strong's Hebrew Concordance, that word is the word that means woe used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. Phil Donahue actually died the day before August 19th, on August 18th, but the first news of it broke on the 19th. Well, anyway, the date 8/18, August 18th, hints at 188. You've got 2 8s and a 1. And that's why and how this connects to the date that Paul Simon will die. Let me explain. So August 19th is 31 days to September 19th. 31 is the 11th prime number. So that's our 11 there. Now, Phil Donahue, coincidentally died at the age of 88 because, as many people that are watching prophetic signs are aware, they're aware of this sign. They're not aware of the vast majority of the signs, but they're aware of this one. And I don't say that arrogantly. I just hope that the knowledge gets out about the overwhelming number of prophetic signs that no one knows about, because I don't want to be the only one that knows about them. Or besides the ones, the handful of people that I share information with through emails. So anyway, the point is that there's a very well-known prophetic sign, which was the death of the creator, the entrepreneur that founded famous Amos Cookies. His name is Amos. I forget his surname. Well, anyway, he died at the age of 88. And that's because it was pointing to the prophet Amos in the Bible, chapter 8, verse 8. And I'll just read that here. All right, now, as often is the case, God is actually, through Bible prophecy regarding ancient Israel, speaking to our time now and America, because America is God's nation, just like Israel. A lot of people don't appreciate that. And so I say that plainly, without apologies or anything, no caveats. America is God's nation. You could say God's Gentile nation if you'd like, but God has had his hand on America. And God is speaking to America through the prophetic signs right now. It's about to be destroyed, just like ancient Israel was destroyed when it turned against God. Okay, so we have Amos 8:8 here. Well, first of all, it gets going in verse 7, but the verse 8 is the verse that gets the idea across of what's happening. And besides, 8:8 is convenient for the Lord because, again, there's a lot of symbolic meaning in this, including what I mentioned about it symbolizing trumpets. This is a trumpet of judgment here. So that's why 8:8. But the verse arguably begins in the prior verse, but not really, because as I say, if you read it, I think it gets going in the 8th verse. But anyway, the Lord has sworn by the pride of Jacob. So this is just like an introduction, but the 8 is when it gets going. Surely I will never forget any of their deeds. Shall not the land tremble on this account, and everyone mourn who dwells in it? And all of it rise like the Nile, and be tossed about and sink again, like the Nile of Egypt. Well, this is quite amazing. Now, first of all, Paul Simon is tied to this because of the arguably most prophetic album of all of his, Graceland, which is about him singing about his journey through the area of the country nicknamed Little Egypt and going through the Mississippi Delta. In fact, the first verse of that song, Graceland, is about him traveling with his 9-year-old son through the Mississippi Delta. Well, the Mississippi Delta is symbolism for the Nile Delta. This isn't an accident. This is all designed by God in order for this parallel that I am explaining right now. That's how important God's prophetic signs are that are only being explained on this channel. So, but the prediction will hopefully get the word out. So anyway, so this theme of the Nile and the Little Egypt and all of this is very important. It points to America. Okay? And the rising of the Nile, I actually believe this is what is going to happen in the last days. America is going to be divided into two after it attempts, along with the rest of the world, to divide Israel into two. And it'll be a testament in the 1,000 years of peace. North America will be split into two. There will be a body of water from the Great Lakes to the Mississippi Delta after a massive earthquake. All right? So there will be like an inland sea, if you will. But people for 1,000 years after will be, look what God did to America when it turned its back on God. It'll be a physical testament on the geography of the land. It's amazing. But that's what's actually being described here in this verse. I'll read it again. Shall not the land tremble? That's an earthquake. And by the way, the seismic hot zone of the largest earthquakes east of the Rockies is the New Madrid, which is situated right directly in the Little Egypt, which is where the eclipses crossed over each other, if you know what I'm talking about. It's all pointing to this coming earthquake. So the land will tremble, and everyone will mourn, and all of it will rise like the Nile, and then be tossed about and sink again like the Nile of Egypt. The Great Lakes are going to spill over into the land. It's going to be horrible. Okay, so that's what's being described. Okay, I think you get the idea now. I could read on, and on that day, declares the Lord God, I will make the sun go down at noon and darken the earth in broad daylight. That's, in my opinion, an allusion to the coming eruption of Yellowstone, which will occur at this same time as the land being divided. I'm pretty sure. And by the way, I believe that date will be November 23rd, based on the science. I'm very confident. Okay. I will turn your feasts into mourning and all your songs into lamentation. I will bring sackcloth on every waist and baldness on every head. I will make it like the mourning for an only son and the end of it like a bitter day. Okay, we're talking about a calamitous day here. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord God, when I will send a famine on the land, not a famine of bread nor thirst for water, but of hearing the words of the Lord. They shall wander from sea to sea and from north to east and shall run to and fro to seek the word of the Lord, but they shall not find it. Okay, so that's Amos 8:8 that God pointed to through the death of famous Amos, to point to the famous prophet in the Bible named Amos. Now, this guy, Amos, famous Amos, the cookie inventor, he was the first black agent, a music rep, a music agent for a very big company. I forget the name. I could go and look up all those details, but it's not relevant, and time is limited. So anyway, he was a significant person, and God uses this sort of thing in his signs firsts. Ultimately, this is a hint at the first black president, the first affirmative action president, Barack Obama, who is the Antichrist. That's why the first black music agent, if you will. Okay, so he's known for he used cookies to lure people into his office and then sign them. That's how he got started in the cookie business. Then he ended up along the way starting his own cookie company, which became Famous Amos, the big, multi-million-dollar company, right? So he, I don't know if it's that big, but it's a pretty big company. I'm pretty sure it would be multi-millionaire, right? So Famous Amos, that's how he got started, and probably he used cookies to get Simon and Garfunkel into his office. This is how it ties to Simon and Garfunkel. Famous Amos signed Simon and Garfunkel. All right? That's how it's amazing. Now, let's review here, because that was on August 13th that Famous Amos died, 2 times 3 days later, which hints at Barack Obama, who wore jersey 23. Gets us to the date of the news breaking of Phil Donahue, who also died at the age of 88, which in turn connects with the 11th prime number of days, 31 days, to September 19th. So you have an 11 and a 23, right? Picture that. Famous Amos, he dies 2 times 3 days before Phil Donahue, both die at the age of 88. And then Donahue connects with the number 11 to September 19th. That's a 23 and 11. That is because the 1,123rd, the 188th prime number is 1,123. 1,123 is an 11 and 23. Okay? Phil Donahue died on the date 8/18, which hints at 188, as does 11 and 23, because 1123 is the 188th prime number. And that's the number that God uses frequently, including, as I just mentioned, in another prophetic Paul Simon connection, to hint at the word in the Bible that means woe! Exclamation mark, used in the context of extreme judgment from God. And furthermore, the sound of silence is recorded in Revelation chapter 8, verse 1. And so arguably, the number 188 also hints at this. And that's why it would connect to Paul Simon and his death on September 19th. So, yes. So there you have it. That's amazing. And okay, so what I'm going to now do is explain what happened, or rather the connections that pointed to August 19th. And like I said, this all is equally as important to learn, because the reason why God did this and pointed to August 19th in the first place was to communicate this knowledge. Like I said, God could have easily just said, hey, you know what, Darren, tell the world that Paul Simon's going to die on September 19th. But that would be, it wouldn't be nearly as amazing as this with all of this information. So what I'm saying is that it's all valid, and there is some amazing information that you really should learn regarding how God pointed to August 19th. It is so amazing. So that will be the subject of the rest of this video. Just keep in mind that it was recorded prior to August 19th, and it was expected that Paul Simon would die on August 19th. But now you know what happened and how August 19th is relevant and how it points to the 11th prime number later to September 19th. Okay? Also, by the way, a big reason for August 19th is the connections from 9/11. That's one of the things you really, really, really need to learn here is how Paul Simon is symbolism for the events of 9/11 and 2001. And speaking of the events of 2001, 9/11, it's all about the number 11. And so that's why God, as you'll see, pointed to August 19th through 9/11 symbolism, because Paul Simon is symbolism for 9/11, and 9/11 is all about the number 11 because it was Flight 11 with a crew of 11 people that flew into the Twin Towers that looked like a giant 11 in the 11th state to join the Union in New York City, which is a name made up of 11 letters. And that's because Jesus coined the phrase the 11th hour, which in ancient Israel referred to the last hour of daylight before darkness, and in English is an idiom that means last chance. Time is running out, as in last chance for America to repent and turn back to God. And so, wait till you hear what I have to say about how Paul Simon is all about 9/11. All right, before we get into how Paul Simon is related in symbolism for 9/11, there is a few more things to add regarding how Phil Donahue connects to Paul Simon. I didn't tell the entire story yet, and you might have guessed that there would be more to the story, and there is. I just forgot, actually, because I learned all of this weeks ago, and every day there's so much learned that's new, it's hard to remember it all. Okay, but fortunately I documented it into an email at the time, and so the story of Donahue's death at the time, first of all, it was announced by his wife, and the story a big part of the story of the death of Phil Donahue was his marriage to his wife, Marlo Thomas. Now, God overlaps signs, or rather, he overlaps themes in his big picture of signs when he's communicating knowledge and information. And this sign of Phil Donahue is in fact a sign that overlaps with the theme of Jimmy Carter and James Earl Jones, king symbolism, and Phil Donahue was the king of daytime talk. Okay? And so the thing too is that on this same day, we had a prophetic sign involving James Taylor, and that's connected to James Earl Jones, and it just goes on and on. Actually, I can't explain it all. It's not possible to do so with... okay, so anyway, and James Taylor, he was supposed to have sung at the first day of the Democratic National Convention, but because of their disorganization, the event went late. In fact, Joe Biden's speech went into the following day. It ended at 12:11 a.m. And so James Taylor's performance was canceled. James Taylor's only other number one hit, other than the one that points to the death of Kamala Harris, because in the song, his song that he wrote, James Taylor, Fire and Rain, there is a lyric in the song mentioning his former band, the Flying Machine, and he speaks about it poetically as being broken into pieces on the ground, which is an allusion to Kamala Harris's death in a plane crash. So anyway, his only other number one hit was written by Carole King. And that's relevant because it ties to Phil Donahue. I guess I thought I would just mention that because Phil Donahue is the king of daytime talk. Well, anyway, Phil Donahue's death, as I'm saying in the articles, it's the story, partly because his death was announced by his wife, his 44 years of marriage to his wife. That hints at the Antichrist king, the 44th president. That's why he was married to Marlo Thomas for 44 years. Another reason for mentioning how it ties to Jimmy Carter is that he met his wife on the Donahue show in 77. And God is using this to point to Carter, who was inaugurated in 1977. So this is more confirmation of the prophetic significance, in other words, for his wife. In other words, God is pointing to the wife of Phil Donahue in this prophetic sign. Okay? Now, Marlo Thomas, his wife of 44 years, was the daughter, or is the daughter, of Danny Thomas. Danny Thomas, who starred in the, according to Wikipedia, 9th most popular TV show in history that ran for 11 seasons. This is a pairing of 9 and 11 that God uses to point to the warning of judgment on 9/11 for America. We are talking about the 9th most popular TV show in American history that ran for 11 seasons. This show was the Danny Thomas Show. So Danny Thomas is a very famous person in American 20th century pop culture. I'm a little too young to be that familiar with it, but this is the case if you read about it. In the middle of the century, Danny Thomas was very famous. Okay? And so Phil Donahue married his daughter. Okay, so the couple met, as I said, in 77 on the Donahue Show. Now, the thing is, Danny Thomas's birth name, it's not Danny Thomas. That's his Hollywood name, if you will. His birth name is Amos Jacob. In other words, Jacob. Amos Jacob is his name. And so that, I needed to mention this because I was just speaking about how the death of Phil Donahue at 88 connects with 2 times 3 days to the death of Wally Amos at 88. But there's more confirmation for that, as there would expect to be with God's signs. The Lord is the master creative artist, and this is the confirmation. It's also, by doing this, communicating that God is pointing to Danny Thomas. This prophetic sign isn't only about Phil Donahue, okay? It's about Danny Thomas, and who was born as Amos Jacob. Okay, so Jacob also means James, and this is another hint at James Earl Carter, and also James Earl Jones. For Donahue's 88th birthday, and this was part of the news, there was a news story about Phil Donahue on his 88th birthday because his wife had a new Jameson drink invented for him. She called up the company Jameson and asked them to create a drink in honor of Phil Donahue for his 88th birthday. And then she made it into a media story. Okay? And Phil Donahue had a son named James who died 10 years before he died. Okay? So, and by the way, that would be when he was 78, and the main reason or big reason for Jimmy Carter and his prophetic significance is that he points to the prophecy in Revelation about the 7th and 8th kings. Okay, so anyway, Phil Donahue was born 913 days before Wally Amos was born. Okay, so again, Phil Donahue points to Amos Jacob, as I just explained. And Phil Donahue, who died at 88, was born 913 days before Wally Amos, who also died at the age of 88. And this is because 913, that's a typo. 913 is the word in Strong's Greek Concordance for Barak. So, and that's again why the marriage with Danny Thomas's Amos Jacob's daughter was for 44 years. We have another confirmation that this is for the purpose of pointing to Barack Obama, the 44th president, and that is this 913 days between the births of these two men that hint at Amos and Amos 8:8, which is why they both died at the age of 88. And I already just read the passage from Amos 8:8. Another way all of this points to Barack Obama is that the day that Wally Amos died was 222 months and 22 days after player number 8, Kobe Bryant, had his 81-point game. Okay? Which was 44 years after the 100-point game of player number 13, Wilt Chamberlain. Okay? So Kobe Bryant had the second highest scoring game in history 44 years after the 100-point game of Wilt Chamberlain. Okay? And Wilt was number 13 and Kobe Bryant was number 8. Well, that hints at the date 813, the day that famous Amos, Wally Amos, died on August 13th, 813, which was 222 months and 22 days after player number 8, which was 44 years after player number 13. The reason for this also is that 100 points and 81 points hint at 181, which is the equivalent of the name Barack Obama in Hebrew gematria. And by the way, Barack Obama is the basketball president. That's why the basketball signs here are relevant also. All this confirms the importance of Amos's death at 88, which connects to Donahue's death at 88. Wally Amos was the first black talent agent for a big corporation. He is the cookie king. Again, king symbolism. Oh, that's another way the deaths of Amos and Donahue connect, is that Amos was the cookie king and Donahue is the king of talk, daytime talk. Okay, so the cookie king effectively used cookies to attract talent. Amos signed Simon and Garfunkel, which is the big point, reason for going into all of this in this video and how it all connects to Paul Simon. Now, also on the day of Donahue's death, the news of it, on August 19th, it was about his marriage, because again, it was announced by his wife, and the story gets into how he was married to her for 44 years. And furthermore, I just elaborated a little bit on why she is prophetically relevant. It's because of her father, although there's much more to explain, and I'll explain it in just a second. So now the story on August 20th was the married couple, the Obamas, delivering their speeches right after each other at the convention. Now, the why that's relevant is because the signs on the 19th went into the 20th with Joe Biden's speech. Joe Biden's speech began before midnight and ended after midnight. It began at 11:26 p.m., which hinted at 126 or 1,260 in the Bible, a period of time that is symbolic of the Antichrist. Okay, so I'm getting into some details that maybe aren't so necessary, but well, let's just finish this. And so the signs go into the 20th, and because of this, it was a 45-minute speech. That's extremely prophetic. I don't know if I should just get into why that's prophetic, though, because I explain it elsewhere. The number 45 is very, very important. But let's just move on. Just take my word for it. We're going to have to start saying that. Just take my word for it. Okay, so rather than explain everything to the minute detail. So this was the same day that Jennifer Lopez filed for divorce in her marriage with Ben Affleck. So we've got this theme going of marriages, okay? And that's how this connects, or rather the signs on the dates overlap. In other words, the Donahue sign flows into the 20th as well. And that's because of the marriages of Obama and Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck. Now, why is this relevant? Well, so she filed for divorce on this day, August 20th, and the Lord has used Jennifer Lopez in prior signs, okay? Including, by the way, her movie Made in Manhattan, which stars Ralph Fiennes, who plays a politician, and he also starred in The English Patient, which is about a plane crash. And all of this is ultimately pointing to Kamala Harris's death in a plane crash. That's another story, okay? Going off on a tangent again. Okay, so back to what I was saying here. Lopez filed for divorce on this day. She's been used in prior signs. That's the heads up to give us a second look at this story. Anything this big, though, these days is pretty much, you can bet, is a guarantee, be confident that it is a sign. But anyway, Affleck's film Argo, which he directed and starred in, won the Oscar for Best Picture. The movie is about the 444-day hostage crisis, otherwise known as the Iranian hostage crisis, because it lasted for 444 days, the last 444 days of Carter's presidency, because this hints at the 44th president. The movie cost $44.5 million. That's a hint at 45, by the way. And again, Biden's speech ended after 45 minutes on this day. So 445 is the 136th semi-prime number, and 136 is the 4 times 4th triangular number. It was Michelle that announced the award from the White House to the awards ceremony in Los Angeles when Affleck won his Best Picture award. It was presented by Michelle Obama. It was on video for the audience, and she was in the White House. On the day of Affleck's divorce, Michelle again presented at the convention. So the Oscar Awards are pretty much a convention, and she presented at that time. And on the day that Affleck got his divorce was also Michelle presenting at a convention. Okay. That's why all of this is amazing and relevant. Now, Michelle will be the 47th president after Harris's predicted plane crash. Argo made $232 million. August 20th, and this day of this Ben Affleck Argo sign, okay? By the way, this is all very, very important. The 444-day hostage crisis is extremely important in God's science for a number of reasons, okay? And so God is pointing to this movie Argo, all right? It's very important here. Now, August 20th is the 232nd day of the year. So that's a confirmation that we are, in fact, being pointed to through the signs by God to the movie Argo, all right? Because the day of this Affleck divorce that's connected with Michelle Obama presenting at both occasions was the 232nd day of the year, and Argo made $232 million. Okay, now this leaves 133 days in a year, and 133 is the 44th semi-prime number. Argo cost $44 million. And we are talking about, if you don't know, by the way, Argo, I think I already mentioned it, Argo is about the 444-day hostage crisis. But this ultimately points to the 44th president. That's why Argo cost $44 million. What a coincidence, by the way. The movie is about the 444-day hostage crisis, and it cost $44 million. And by the way, although a lot of people don't know, some people may not know that the other a name for the Iranian hostage crisis is the 444-day hostage crisis. Back at the time that it happened, or right after, it was referred to as such. But at the end of the movie, it does say that the hostage crisis lasted for 444 days. That's actually a part of the movie. It's not just a side note from Wikipedia, it's actually in the movie, which thereby confirms this as a prophetic sign that is pointing to what I'm saying it is pointing to. The 44th president. Okay, and so that's why, again, Argo cost $44 million. Now, the date, August 20th, and these signs was a date that was known ahead of time to be pointed to by God in relation to Kamala Harris's death in a plane crash. Okay, one of the stories on August 20th, one of the main stories, is how she couldn't make it back to the convention in Chicago in time to be there, but watched her husband's speech from her plane. This is another sign about marriages. Okay, again, one of the big signs on the 20th, a date we were expecting for a Kamala Harris plane prophetic sign was the story of her in her plane watching her husband speak at the convention and lamenting that she couldn't be there in time to be there in person because she was returning from a campaign event. But the story is how she was in her plane. There's even a picture of her in her plane watching on her laptop or whatever her husband give his speech at the convention. So not only is it Harris and a plane sign, but it's also a marriage sign, which further confirms this theme that confirms everything about it pointing to Ben Affleck's movie Argo because of the divorce of Affleck on this day. Okay. And by the way, I forget if I mentioned later, but it's relevant too that Jennifer Lopez filed for divorce exactly 2 years after she filed for a second divorce with Ben Affleck exactly 2 years after they married for the second time. Okay? The inverse of 45 is 0.0222. That's why Biden's speech ended on this day after 45 minutes, and on and on. Okay. One reason, by the way, for that is the symbolism for the Lord's second coming and also the second presidency of the Antichrist, Barack Obama. Now, Argo made, and I did also mention the 222 months and 22 days connection between player number 8's 81-point game and the death of Wally Amos at the age of 88. Okay. Argo made $232.2 million. H232 in the Hebrew concordance is waistcloth, and G232 in the Greek concordance is the word to fish. The moon at this time on August 20th is in Aquarius, which is depicted with a waistcloth and is the sturgeon full moon. Sturgeon is a type of fish. Okay, August 19th to 20th was the full moon, the sturgeon full moon. That's amazing. That's why another confirmation that this is pointing to Argo, because it made 232 million. And we have these two words in the Bible from the concordance that point to the moon, and the moon is a giant rock, which in the Bible, a rock is symbolic of Jesus, and so all of this is confirmation. So also, Satan is equal to 232 in Hebrew gematria. Now, this is very important. Donahue died on August 19th, the day of the full sturgeon moon. Donahue pointed to Danny Thomas, as I explained, who founded St. Jude's Hospitals. This is the big thing here that God is pointing to through Danny Thomas. It isn't only that he had the 9th most popular show for 11 seasons. Not that it was that it was popular for all 11 seasons, you know what I mean. But God is pointing to how he founded the St. Jude's Hospitals. So if you don't know, the St. Jude's Hospitals are a very big deal. They're these charity hospitals for sick kids. There's a few of them nationally. The first one was, and the main one, is in Memphis, Tennessee, the home of the king as in Donahue, king of talk, the king of rock. Okay, so anyway, Danny Thomas started the charity hospital, St. Jude's, as a promise to build a shrine to St. Jude. The story is, he was broke and he prayed to the St. Jude for employment, and he donated at the time that he made the prayer $7. I guess he gave it to the cathedral or whatever. That's the story, actually. Sorry. That is the story. It's not a whatever. That's what I recall now. He was in the church and he donated his $7 and prayed to St. Jude. Within a week, he got a gig for 10 times the amount. Donahue's son died 10 years before he died, whose name is James and all that. Okay, so this is how his career started. This is how the very famous Danny Thomas, the career of Danny Thomas's began. Thomas prayed to a demon. That's the truth. And that's why we have the number 232 on this date. Furthermore, the symbolism in the Iranian hostage crisis points to Daniel chapter 10 in the Bible. Speaking of 10, not speaking of it, it's part of the purpose of this, which regards the prince of Persia, which is symbolism for Satan. Okay? In the Bible, there is a prince of Persia, but it's allegory, it's symbolism for Satan. And that's why the threat to Israel today, the main enemy is Iran, Persia. It all goes back to the Bible and this symbolism of Satan. And so the truth about Catholicism is that it is wicked deception from Satan. God absolutely hates Catholicism. He doesn't hate Catholics, and this isn't bigoted, anti-Catholic words here. I'm just speaking truth. The thing that God hates most in the Bible is false religion. The Jews were guilty of this. They were guilty of mixing the true religion with the religion of their pagan neighbors. God chastised them for it and ultimately exiled them for it to Babylon. And then later Persia, because the Persian Empire conquered Babylon. So that's what Catholicism is. When Rome converted it to Christianity in 313 AD, it didn't do away with its ancient pagan traditions. It just repackaged them. This includes the saints. The saints are the praying to the various different gods. You don't pray to a dead person. That's forbidden in the Bible. But of course, Catholics don't read the Bible, especially things like this in the Old Testament. Well, anyway, I'm generalizing. There are, of course, some Catholics that do read the Bible, and there is all kinds of Catholic propaganda that's in their culture to brainwash them into convincing them that their absurd interpretations of various things are correct, reading into passages things that aren't there. Okay? But the Bible's clear to not pray to dead people, including Mary. And it's just pagan, because the praying to Mary and saints, well, the praying to Mary is the repackaging of the ancient practice of worshiping the fertility goddess, which is why all of the artwork of Mary in medieval times is, Jesus is just a footnote, he's a side note, he's the baby Jesus, which is the trick from Satan to focus on Mary and not Jesus, but it's the same thing as the artwork for Ishtar, Aphrodite, Isis. It's this fertility goddess worship. There's this inclination for people to want to worship fertility, and that's Mary. And anyway, so when Catholics pray to Mary and saints, the truth is they are praying to demons. All right? I'm only trying to help by speaking truth. The reason for this prediction that is from God, and believe me, I know far better than you the reason for this prediction that is from God, it is to prove what I have just said. Enough is enough. It's time for the Catholics listening to this to reconsider, before you are out of time. You are making a grave error. Okay, I'm not saying that no Catholics will be saved, but if they are or will be, it'll be in spite of their Catholicism, not because of it. God will be very, very merciful on them. So anyway, the point here is that this needs to be said to be able to explain Danny Thomas. The reason for Danny Thomas's success is that he was praying to Satan. Danny Thomas ended up becoming one of the most famous Americans in history. All right? And he did this, and he became famous after praying to St. Jude, which is why Danny Thomas is associated with his St. Jude's hospitals. To know the history of Danny Thomas is to know that he is the St. Jude's hospital guy. Okay? So I think I've explained it enough now. Now, what's important to this, though, is that he also said that the reason for the St. Jude's hospitals is that he promised St. Jude to build St. Jude a shrine. This is pagan. This is the same thing that the Jews did when they built shrines, altars, to the god Baal and worshipped at these false altars, this pagan religion that God hated and ultimately destroyed Israel for. Today in America, America has become a pagan nation again. There are all kinds of parallels with modern America and ancient pagan worship. I won't get into that. That's another video. But this is the same thing here when Danny Thomas is building these shrines to St. Jude, and it is through this and Danny Thomas that God is communicating that America has become a pagan nation again after having rejected God. But now, the main one, as I said, the main St. Jude Hospital was built in Memphis, the first one. And by the way, the reason why is because he was told by a priest, as I wrote in the paragraph here. This was a suggestion from the priest that he build it in Memphis because the priest was originally from Memphis. I forget where they were at the time, but it wasn't anywhere near Tennessee. But the priest said, build it in Memphis. I'm from Memphis. So Danny Thomas did. Now, Elvis Presley had a relationship with Danny Thomas because of this, because of the St. Jude Hospital having been built in Memphis. Memphis, of course, is where Elvis Presley lived in his Graceland estate, symbolism for a king's palace. Memphis being named after Memphis, Egypt, and the king of Egypt is, in the Bible, symbolic of Satan. Now, Danny Thomas was born 23 years and 2 days, which is another 232 here, which again is the equivalent of Satan in Gematria, as well as King Abaddon, all right, before the King of Rock. So Danny Thomas was born, so this is confirmation that the two are connected in an evil way, symbolically. Danny Thomas was born 23 years and 2 days before the King of Rock, Elvis. So the two converged in Memphis because of the hospital and Elvis's Graceland estate. But this is a satanic connection, and it's confirmed by this 23 years and 2 days connection. Now, what is God pointing to here? Why? Why is this so important that God has told this story here? This is an amazing story I'm telling, by the way. Hopefully you appreciate what's going on here. We're getting deeper and deeper here, right? The reason for all of this is that Elvis Presley is symbolism for the thing that's put into people to supposedly prevent them from getting such and such disease. All right? So Elvis Presley took the thing at the Ed Sullivan Show, prior to the show, in front of the press, as a promotional thing for taking the polio thing. And because he did this, things became acceptable for the baby boomer generation. Had Elvis not done this, history would have been completely different. Who knows what the future of the thing industry would have been? Because the truth is that the thing did not stop polio. It had already been well in decline, and there's no impact at all that things made. That's the truth. Okay, so but the hype was there, and the industry was there, and it's a lie, and it's the case with the other supposed diseases that were supposedly conquered by things that it's not true. There are other factors that were the reason for the disappearance of certain other diseases, and primarily hygiene. But that's another story, and you need to look into that if you don't already know this sort of information. But what I am telling you is that the reason for this prediction from God, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction, is to prove what I have just said. Make no mistake. Okay, the whole thing industry is a lie. All right? Now, and Elvis is symbolic of this. God's communicated this many other ways in other signs explained in other videos, okay? But that's what we have here. We have Elvis connected to healthcare, because Elvis was a big friend of Danny Thomas and donated a lot of money to Danny Thomas because of the St. Jude Hospital in Memphis. And it's a kids' hospital, and it's a shrine, as I just explained, which is a parallel with the shrines to the god of Baal in the Bible. And in the Bible, what did the Jews do on the shrine of Baal? They sacrificed their kids. They sacrificed their babies. They put them in the fire of the altar of the god Baal, like their pagan neighbors did. Today, the parallel with this is abortions. That's the sacrifice on the altar of self. A parallel with paganism is the worship of the self. It's not the god Baal, it's the self, and part of it is the sacrifice of kids and babies. But the mark of the Antichrist was shamefully, isn't the right word, given to kids and promoted for such a thing. It was promoted as being good for kids, even though this CVD disease did not affect kids at all. That's another lie, right? It was a sacrifice. This is the first time in history where the older generation sacrificed the kids for themselves, because kids transmit the disease, and the disease killed susceptible people that were very old. And so out of fear, the baby boomer generation had the kids take the thing, which is a sacrifice of the kids' generation. And that was a breaking of the social contract. That's the end of America right there. You do not do that. The older generation does not sacrifice the young generation for themselves. And they all knew that the thing was an experiment. And had they not been listening to the propaganda, they would know how dangerous it is. And so they do know, but it's a cult. It's a brainwashed cult. And tyranny ultimately coming from Satan. And this is horrific that this happened, that kids were given this thing that they did not need. Okay, so, and because the thing is the mark of the Antichrist, it's a spiritual abomination, and it has done so much harm to young people, to many young people, as have other things in history too. So I'm going to leave it at that regarding this discussion about the thing, but it is the mark of the Antichrist. Make no mistake. The reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that it is the thing in its current form. It does not need an additional something to go with it, such as an additional technology or false form of religious worship or a supposed new age of dispensation after supposedly all quote-unquote Christians are raptured. In fact, one of the main reasons why the vast majority of quote-unquote Christians have already taken the thing is that it is judgment for this particular doctrine. And the commonly held objections that people have based on their understanding of Bible prophecy will be proven to be incorrect when the prediction comes to pass. But also, I answer these commonly held objections at the end of the must-watch snake bite video. So, I'm glad we went further into this story regarding Phil Donahue and Paul Simon and how all of this is relevant. Now, when Paul Simon dies on September 19th, it'll prove everything that I have said, especially the controversial things. This is the point, the reason for the prediction. And now I will explain some more amazing things regarding Paul Simon, including how he is symbolism for 9/11. And God communicated these stories through the date he was pointing to, August 19th. All right, this video is documenting how it is known in advance that singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on August 19th, 2024. The date that this email is composed was on August 12th. Okay, we can see that here. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward this to you. Okay, so this is how I'm going to briefly explain some of the brief points for how it is known in advance that Paul Simon will die on August 19th, which will confirm that this prediction isn't just picking a date out of randomly and hoping that it happens on the state. In other words, it'll prove for the rationally thinking person that this information is from God. This email is documenting the prediction that singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on August 19th. Paul Simon is predicted to die on August 19th, exactly 15 months after the release of his 15th album, 7 Psalms, for which he says he received the instructions in a dream to produce the album and name it 7 Psalms. Simon's first big hit was Sound of Silence. He released 7 Psalms at the age of 81. In Revelation 8:1, a brief period of silence was heard in heaven before the 7 trumpet judgments of destruction. I am certain that Simon is unaware of the fact that he released the album 7 Psalms exactly 4 years, 4 months, and 4 days after he had the dream. He tells people about the date of the dream. He has the interviewers shows them the framed piece of paper that he wrote on after he had the dream, and all this is a big story regarding the album. He tells this story about how he was told to make the album in a dream. And it was 4 years, 4 months, and 4 days apart. This hints the 44th president and Antichrist. Before becoming the president again, the 44th president will become the 51st vice president, and this is what Simon's 15th album hints at. 15 hints at 51. Obama will become the 51st vice president after it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash in the city of St. Louis. In his signs, God uses the number 188 to hint at H188, the word in Strong's Hebrew Concordance that means woe! Exclamation mark. It is used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. Simon grew up in Queens, New York City. He is predicted to die exactly 1188, which hints at H188, after an American Airlines flight crashed. Okay, I forgot to include the word weeks, okay? So Simon is predicted to die. Simon grew up in Queens, New York City, and he is predicted to die exactly 1188, which hints at H188, weeks after an American Airlines flight crashed into a residential neighborhood of Queens, New York City. Flight 587 crashed into Queens on the date 11/12 in 2001. By the way, Simon has a famous song in which the famous chorus is Queen of Corona. Corona is, from what I understand, a neighborhood in Queens, and he's talking about a woman, but it's a coincidence that it's in Queens and it's the Queen of Corona. But anyway, that's another tie with Paul Simon to Queens, which is where the neighborhood was that the American Airlines flight crashed after 9/11. Okay? So flight 587 crashed into Queens on the date 11/12 in 2001. Shortly after flight 11, with a crew of 11 people, crashed into the twin towers that looked like a giant 11 in the 11th state to join the Union in New York City, which is made up of 11 letters. Jesus coined the phrase the 11th hour, which referred to the last hour of daylight before the 12th hour of darkness. In English, the 11th hour is an idiom that means last chance. Time is running out, which is what the events of 9/11 were, a judgment warning from God that this is the last chance for America to repent and turn back to God. The events of 9/11 were a last chance for America to repent and turn back to God, or else judgment destruction. The date of the crash of Flight 587 hinted at 11/12 in 2001, which hinted at the 11th hour going into the 12th hour. So that was why this Flight 587 crashed into Queens right after 9/11. It was God following up, communicating this theme of last chance for America, okay? He did 9/11, and then right after that, on the date 11/12, which hints at the 11th hour going into the 12th hour, God communicated that what was communicated on 9/11 was a last chance, time is running out, warning of judgment. This was in Queens, New York. Not only that, what I didn't mention in this paragraph here is that Paul Simon is associated with 9/11 because right after 9/11, the nationally televised show Saturday Night Live, 5 days after 9/11. Okay, so in the other videos, I talk about the association between Paul Simon and Wembanyama and the association with the number 5. So anyway, I just realized that the God was doing all that because it was 5 days after 9/11 that Paul Simon sang on Saturday Night Live. All right, so okay, that's amazing. You watch the other videos and you'll appreciate how amazing what I'm saying is. Okay, so anyway, he sang right after 9/11 to the nation through the show Saturday Night Live in Manhattan. That's where the show is recorded. And also, he sang famously the song Sound of Silence at the 10th anniversary ceremony at Ground Zero. Okay? And 10 also hints at 5 times 2, which hints at 52, and 2 times 26, and the 226th word in Strong's Hebrew Concordance, which is the word that means prophetic sign. Okay, so that's another reason why this Flight 587 associates with Paul Simon, this crash into Queens. Okay. Now, it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash 23 days later after Paul Simon's predicted death on 9/11 in 2024, which will be the 23rd anniversary of 9/11, which would be why Paul Simon is predicted to die 23 days before Kamala Harris's plane crash, because Paul Simon is associated with 9/11 23 years ago. Paul Simon sang the song American Tune for Jimmy Carter at his pre-inaugural ball. God is using Jimmy Carter to point to a prophecy in the book of Revelation that regards the 5th through 8th kings. On the same date as the crash of Flight 587, the New Jersey State Lotto, for the first time, held 2 Pick-3 lotteries on the same day. The numbers in the Pick-3 lottos on the day of the crash of Flight 587 were 587 and 578. This hinted at the prophecy regarding the 5th through 8th kings, but specifically the prophecy is also about a 7th king. So that's why the 7 in this number too, in the number 587. The crash of Flight 587 killed 265 people. 265 is the 58th semi-prime number. The crash of Flight 587 was 58 days after Paul Simon sang in New York City on the show Saturday Night Live. This was 4 days after the events of 9/11. Is that right? No, it's 5 days, because it was a Tuesday, and Saturday Night Live is obviously 5 days later. All right, I'm wrong. It's actually 4 days later. So forget what I said about the connection between Wembanyama and the number 5 here with the 5 days. All right. So the crash of Flight 587 into Queens, where Simon grew up, was the 3rd flight to crash and kill people in New York City at that time. Right? Well, you know what? I don't know of any other flights that crashed into New York City except for those 3. So anyway, it was the 3rd one. Wednesday is the 4th day of the week. Simon's famous performance in New York City 4 days after 9/11, and the 3rd flight to crash into New York City, where Simon grew up, hints at Simon & Garfunkel's first album titled Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m. The album cover art is the 2 of them in the subway in New York City. Harris's plane is predicted to crash into a major city on a Wednesday, the 4th day of the week, at 3 a.m. So this is actually making more sense. Yes. So we have the 3 flights that crashed into New York City, and Paul Simon sang in New York City 4 days after 9/11. So there you have it. That's the reason for the 3 and the 4 there, and that confirms the relevance of the first album titled Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m. 3 a.m. on the 4th day of the week. Okay, so further confirmation that in God's signs that Paul Simon symbolizes the warning of judgment on 9/11 is that Paul Simon famously sang Sound of Silence at Ground Zero on 9/11, the memorial on the 10th anniversary. And I just explained 10 equals 5 times 2, which equals or hints at 52, which hints at 2 times 26, which hints at the 226th word in the Hebrew Concordance, which is the word that means prophetic sign. In other words, Paul Simon is a prophetic sign. Additional confirmation that Paul Simon symbolizes the 9/11 events in Manhattan is that Simon and Garfunkel's prophetic reunion concert in Central Park in Manhattan drew 500,000 fans. The name Paul Simon in Hebrew gematria is equal to 500, and the concert on September 1981 was exactly 500 months before the release of the 7 Psalms album on May 19th, 2023. The Central Park, which by the way is exactly 15 months before August 19th, the date he's predicted to die, and Paul Simon has released 15 studio albums. The prophetic one, last one, being the 7 Psalms album, released 15 months exactly before his predicted death. Okay, so the Central Park concert in Manhattan was exactly 9 months and 11 days after the Beatles musician John Lennon was shot and killed next to Central Park in Manhattan. So that's more confirmation of the connection between Paul Simon and 9/11, which therefore confirms the relevance of this flight that crashed into Queens, New York, where Paul Simon grew up. And so you get the idea here. And that's, but not only that, Kamala Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash on the 23rd anniversary of 9/11, which will be a Wednesday morning at 3 a.m. September 11th, 2024 is a Wednesday, and she is predicted to die at 3 a.m. in a plane crash. 23 days after the death of Paul Simon, because Paul Simon sang after 9/11 on Saturday Night Live 23 years ago. Simon and Garfunkel's prophetic reunion concert on September 11th, 1981 is exactly 515 months before it is predicted that Paul Simon will die on August 19th, 2024. His death will symbolize a brief period of silence or calm before the 7 trumpet judgments of destruction. 515 is the 159th semi-prime number, which is a number divisible by only 2 other prime numbers, which God uses in his signs and connections. 159 is the 53rd semi-prime number. The reciprocal of 53 is 0.0188, which hints at the 188th word in Strong's Hebrew Concordance, which is the word that means woe, exclamation mark, used in the context in the Bible of extreme judgment from God, which is what the death of Paul Simon will communicate. It will be a woe because he and his death will symbolize the sound of silence or a period of calm, in this case 23 days before the death of Kamala Harris and the beginning of the trumpet judgments and the rise of the Antichrist, who will replace Kamala Harris and become the president again. Which is, by the way, what the prophecy of the 5th through 8th kings hints at, but that's explained in other videos. Okay, so Simon and Garfunkel's first album was Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. Simon's predicted death on August 19th, 2024, will point to a few days later when Kamala Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash on a Wednesday morning at 3 a.m. Harris will be on a flight from her home in Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. Harris's cross-country flight between her 2 homes will be symbolism for Simon and Garfunkel's second big hit, Homeward Bound. Simon's predicted death on August 19th, 2024 will be exactly 703 months after the release of Homeward Bound on January 19th, which hints at 9/11, in 66, which hints at the Antichrist, 666. On 9/11, in 2001, 7 times 7 times 7 firefighters died when the towers collapsed, and there were 7 plus 7 times 7 passengers on the second plane that flew into the second tower that collapsed. 703 months hints at the symbolic 3 sets of 7 that the Israelites enacted before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment. 703 is also the 37th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 37th row is 703, and this too hints at 3 sets of 7. 37 hints at 3 sets of 7. Simon sang Homeward Bound with George Harrison, which hints at Harris, Kamala Harris, on Saturday Night Live on November 20th, 1976, exactly 88 months after Apollo 11 landed on the moon. The moon is a giant rock, and in the Bible, rock is symbolism for Jesus. Apollo 11 and 88 months hints at H188 and whoa, exclamation mark. Apollo 11 landed on the moon exactly 4 years and 9 months after the birth of the 49th Vice President, Kamala Harris. In the Bible, judgment on a people symbolically begins at the gate. Harris was born on October 20th, 1964, exactly 1 year, 8 months, and 8 days, which hints at H188, whoa, exclamation mark, after construction began at the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, near where she is predicted to crash. In other words, her crash will be a symbolic or prophetic sign at the gate, beginning of judgment. Americans traveling to the moon is symbolism for being homeward bound, because of the moon symbolism being symbolic of Christ. For those in Christ, this world is not their home, but they are homeward bound. These connections involving the death of Harris on her homeward bound flight and her replacement with the Antichrist communicate that America has departed from Christ. Kamala Harris's plane is predicted to crash Wednesday, August 19th this is not correct anymore. It is not, this is a typo. It's predicted that Paul Simon will die on August 19th. It was, anyway. She's predicted to die 23 days after Simon's predicted to death on August 19th. Simon and Garfunkel's album Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m. was released on October 19th, 1964, which was the day before Harris's birth, on October 20th, 1964. The release of Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m. on October 19th, 1964 is exactly 718 months before the predicted death of Paul Simon. That will be a sound of silence that precedes Harris's predicted plane crash 23 days later at 3 a.m. on Wednesday morning. 718 is the 218th semi-prime number, and 218 is the 73rd, which hints at 3 sets of 7, semi-prime number. 718 is also 59 years and 10 months, and H591 is the Hebrew word in Strong's Concordance that means a ship, which hints at Harris's ship that will crash on a Wednesday morning at 3 a.m. when she will be 59 years and 10 months old. Well, actually, she will be in her 59th year and 10th month. Okay? All right. So this is merely scratching the surface of the reasons for how this prediction is known in advance. For more information, please visit Odyssey, spelled ODYSEE.com, or rumble.com video channels, Harris Crash Prediction, and also read the website trumpprediction.com. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived, and more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the BitChute.com or the Odyssey.com channel. And do it now in case you aren't able to later.